Hi there, this is Rebecca from Suburban Stone Age, and I wanted to do a quick video on how I mix my compost pile. I have a big batch of compost to make this morning, so I thought I'd explain how I do it in my yard. What's new this morning is that this is my compost kind of mixing bin, and I just extended it last night. I added 2 new bales, so you can see the shiny gold ones are the new ones, so I have more room. And I'm going to mix up a big batch of compost. The debris you see there is just from the garden. It's from about the last 2 months worth of stuff, and I've been storing it here in a dry pile with the intention of mixing up a good well-mixed batch and hot composting it. So that's the stage that we're doing today. The method that works for me is to build a compost bin out of straw bales. So that's an inexpensive and easy way for me to have some structure to my pile. And also when the straw rots out as it ages, it becomes good compost itself. So that's sort of my style, is to use the straw bales as my walls. And when I'm expanding out into a new pile, what I'll do is put down a layer of cardboard, couple sheets thick. That's a fresh thing of cardboard there. You can see the grass is kind of fallen on top, but underneath that is even more cardboard. And that's to keep things like that green vine that you see in the back from creeping underneath and coming up through the compost. Eventually the cardboard will rot away, and it works pretty good. I have had a lot of luck using it so far. So if you look closely at the different layers, these are just, on the bottom is kind of the old stuff that's already sort of begun to compost. And then the newer stuff from the yard is on top, and it ends with fresh grass clippings that were put in yesterday. As I move the compost into this new empty space here, I'm going to try to get a good mixture of greens to browns. I shoot for a 50-50 mix. It's hard to know exactly. I mean, I know there's a ratio you're supposed to know, or supposed to shoot for when you mix it, but in reality, it's difficult to say exactly how much greens something has versus how much browns, leaves versus cardboard versus wood. And so I shoot for a 50-50 mixture, and it seems to do a pretty good job getting hot. So I'll keep refining it as time goes on, but that's about where I am so far. And then you can, like I say, when it comes to actually accumulating a pile, you can see how it sort of self-composts over time. That bottom layer is almost totally decomposed. And that's actually an old layer. That's what's been left over from probably the past year. Okay, so in order to get a really good finished product, I like to make sure that I treat the inputs as it's all in the prep, basically. So I like to grind up a lot of the woody stalks. There's some corn and sunflower stalks from the garden. I like to grind that up with my grinder, which is over here, and that makes it small, and there's a lot of surface area for the bacteria to break down, and all the little goodies in the compost to break down much more quickly. And then at the end of the processing time, I'm left with a pretty fine textured compost, and that's much easier for me to deal with and take out to the garden, or just plant in place, or whatever I want to do. But what I don't end up with is chunky, stringy, viney compost that still has tough woody parts that haven't digested as quickly. So a little bit of prep in the beginning by grinding down some of the bigger chunks, especially the woody, carbony kind of things, goes a long way towards making a much easier to deal with product. I find it's worth the investment. Okay, so excuse me, this is where I'm going to start grinding up some corn stalks. You can see I did one in the bottom, and it chips it. So this grinder, I try not to use too many machines that require electricity around here, but this is one of the few things that I really needed to help me. So it works great, and I'll show you what it does. Hang on here, it's going to get really loud. Sorry about that. So just add a corn stalk in, or whatever. there you go. It chips it right down and reduces the space it takes, increases surface area, and makes it much nicer as a finished product. Okay, we're done grinding all the woody stalks. The next step is to break down some of these sort of bigger pieces here. These are zucchini that I took out past weekend. I'm going to chop them up here with the hedge clippers, just give them a real rough chop. They'll actually turn mushy and rot pretty quickly, so I don't need to grind them as fine as the other woody materials, but I do want to break up some of the stringiness. So I'm going to chop them up and add them to the pile. Okay, now we've given most of the big stuff a rough chop, and now it's time to do the fun stuff, which is basically the mixing and moistening. This part should go by pretty fast because the rest of the material that's left is mostly this chopped green grass and leaves and other finely shredded material. So I don't have a lot of prep work to do here. Mainly what I'm going to do is just take this hose and I'm going to moisten the layer that's already in there and try to get it to sort of a wet sponge consistency. That does work the best. You don't want to over wet it because that can cause just as many problems as under wetting it, but just get in there and hose it down and keep stirring it, and eventually you'll get the feel for it. So then I'm going to take the pitchfork here, handy pitchfork, and I'm just going to basically move the material from here over to that area there, mix it up, add water, and then make another layer and do the same thing over and over until it's full. And when it's full, we will basically just cover it up and then let it go, and it should start to hot compost within 24 hours. You'll see a dramatic jump in temperature. Okay, I just wanted to take a quick second, take a break and show you the consistency that works kind of for me. It's this kind of mushy consistency. You don't want to get it too much wetter than that. There's some in here that's a little bit more dry. This might actually even be slightly too wet. But it'll all work out. It's fine. It's not dripping, soaking wet. It's kind of medium. And in the end, what'll happen is that the whole pile will start to sort of steam itself. So as it heats up and it sits in the sun and it starts to break down, it homogenizes pretty well. So, you know, some slightly drier place will sort of get steamed by the wetter places and so on and so on. So if you just shot for an evenly moist pile like that, it should work out in the long run and be fine. Okay, this is my finished little batch of compost. Smaller than I thought it would be, but the reason that I stopped, well, it's big enough actually, it should get hot, believe it or not. This is an average sort of size for one of my other straw bale cubes that I compost in, so I think it'll probably get hot in the center and be okay. The reason though that I stopped without actually mixing the whole pile here is because on this side it's mostly green, and that can get really hot, too hot, and without that balance of having enough carbon in there, because what it's missing right now are a lot of leaves and wood. That's something I've noticed when it comes to seasonal composting is in the summer, which we're in at the end of right now, you have an excess of nitrogen, and in the winter you have an excess of carbon. The carbon comes from things like, you know, fallen leaves and chipped, you know, if you're pruning fruit boughs and you're chipping the twigs, it's a lot of carbon. But conversely, the grass in the winter isn't growing, and grass clippings in our compost pile are a major source of nitrogen. In the summer, there's not, you know, the trees have their leaves. They're not falling, and there's not a lot of wood that's getting chipped and put in, but there is a lot of, the grass is growing vigorously, and so there's a lot of green for the pile. So my strategy here is to leave this pile just as it is and keep it dry. I'll be in trouble if it gets wet. Shouldn't be a problem. We're not expecting any rain for a couple months. Sprinklers don't hit it. It should just dry out and stay static. If it were to get wet though, it could get too hot and be a problem. But I don't think it's going to be a problem in this case. I'm just going to keep my eye on it, and most importantly, I'm just going to leave it alone. And when I'm ready to compost, when we get a few more browns going in here, then I will mix it, add moisture, and then it should just take off. So there you go. That's me mixing the compost pile, and we'll check back in and see how the temperatures in the mixed portion are doing in a little bit. Okay, so now it's the evening. So this morning is when I mixed the batch of compost, and at the time when I first put the thermometer in, it was about 80 degrees, but as you can see, it's already started to heat up. And right now we're at about 130. I expect it to actually get at least 140, probably like 150 is about right. So it's doing pretty good. It got pretty fast, pretty quickly. I'll check it again in the morning, but it's well on its way to hot composting, so that's a good sign. It's the following morning, and the compost pile's gotten just a wee bit over 150 degrees, just like I thought it would. I don't think it's going to get much hotter than this, and I don't want it to. This is actually right in the hot zone, just where we need it. It should peak here and then start to decline. So this compost batch is well underway, and we're just going to let it sit here and do its thing. And as a finished product, I wanted to show you what a finished batch of compost looks like. This is what you get at the end when it's done cooking, and it's just beautiful, beautiful compost. This is all 100% yard scraps. This is made all from debris from the yard and the garden, and it's recycled and turned back into soil and then replanted back to garden again. So there you have it. That's how I make compost here at Suburban Stone Age.